Check, check, check. Check. Check, 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 check. Yeah, I found it in the equity policy. Check, check, check. Are we good? Good to go. Perfect. All right, so we're going to get started. Hopefully, I'm going to keep that there. So if everyone could just listen up, we're going to get started, and then we'll be able to move forward with the evening. So, of course, before we get started, of course, we're just going to start with the land acknowledgement and the equity acknowledgement. So the Dalhousie Student Union acknowledges that Dalhousie University and the Dalhousie Student Union building are located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The DSU wants to acknowledge that the ongoing impacts of colonization are present on campus and in the Halifax community. This is reflected in a number of ways, including but not limited to the underrepresentation of Indigenous students enrolled in university, ongoing racism faced by Indigenous people, the disproportionate number of Indigenous people in the judicial system, the high number of Indigenous children in state care, a chronic lack of base services available in Indigenous communities, the failure of government to honor treaty rights, and the disproportionate levels of violence faced by Indigenous women. And as well, the student union solidarity is based on the principle that all members should be able to participate equally in their union, recognizing that students have diverse experiences of privilege and marginalization. As members of the students' union, mutual respect, cooperation, and understanding are our goals. We should neither condone nor tolerate behavior that undermines the dignity of any individual or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. It is our collective responsibility to create an inclusive space for discussion and dialogue. Any form or forms of discrimination and or harassment will not be tolerated, nor will hate speech rooted in but not limited to sexist, racist, classist, ableist, homophobic, or transphobic sentiment and or remarks. We all have an obligation to ensure that an open and inclusive space free of hate is established. If you violate this understanding, you will be asked to leave. So we are evidently below the quorum minimum requirement. That said, in respect of those of you who are here, in respect of council and the executive members who have prepared items for tonight, and for those who are potentially watching this live stream or who will subsequently watch the video recording afterwards, we are going to move forward in an informal basis pursuant to Robert's rules. We're not going to be doing any voting. There will be no sort of formal element to the evening, but it will allow for the presentation of materials, the question and answer, and a future AGM will need to be scheduled for the purposes of actual formal decision-making and voting to happen. So I am going to move forward with the agenda as it was circulated. Again, no need for motions to accept or adopt said agenda because we're not moving forward in a formal capacity. This is not a formal AGM meeting. So the first point that we had to address today was the ratification of the auditor. Given that that is something that we need to vote on, we're going to move on to the next item, and that'll have to get pushed to the next time that we meet. So first, we have a presentation from the VPFO, Dylan, on the status of last year's audited financial statements.
All right. So unfortunately, the audited statements are still in a draft form. We've had some back and forth with our auditor that has left them in not a complete version, but we'll go through them nonetheless because much of the year's information is still valid. I will highlight a couple of places where the previous year, so 2015's information, is not accurate, and we're going to get to the bottom of that before we release them for everyone to look at, but we can run through this year's. So we'll open with the statement from the auditor. Our auditor is PricewaterhouseCoopers, who we've put forward as to continue. Our statement is a qualified opinion because our completeness is susceptible to satisfactory audit verification. So, getting to the information, you'll see our assets are listed here. Take them in. I'm not going to go line by line because that will take us 3 days. Our most important category is here. So this is our year over revenue and expenses. And you can see that we have increased spending. So we did post a $124,000 deficit from last year. And this is thought to be accurate right now. We've seen in abundance of losses from our investment portfolio that has since bounced back substantially. Still not to the level that we'd like to see, but we're working on that with our investment manager. As well, we've seen more usage in our health plan that sum up basically 2 of the largest losses. Other than that, you can see smaller losses in bar services and other areas of our operations. Yeah. Folks have questions about that, please don't hesitate. We'll see our net assets took a loss there. And I will just scroll through these, I guess. I don't know if people want to highlight it.
Give the estimated timeline.
Sorry, yeah. So the estimated timeline to get them the final documents is by the next council meeting, at which point they'll be posted online and folks can look at them and go into them in more depth and get back to me if they have any questions. Don't hesitate. In the meantime, if you have any questions about this, feel free to bring them now or to reach out to me by email. Always accessible, vpfo@dsu.ca, yeah. I'm just going to finish scrolling, I guess. Yeah, I know.
There's no need for it to be exhaustive.
Okay. All right, back to you.
Perfect. So again, that was the sort of the status update on the budget. It's not finished yet, going back and forth with the auditor. So as a reminder to those here today, as well as anybody watching on the stream, this is not the compiled financial statements for the proposed budget for this year. These are last year's documents that have been audited and then returned back. And so that's what Dylan is digging through at the moment. So are there any questions for Dylan about the status of last year's financial statements? Perfect. All right. So again, tentative timeline, as indicated, they should be sort of fully revised and in a final form within the next couple of weeks. The next tentatively scheduled council meeting is October 26th. Once they've been posted online, Dylan will be available and open for further question from the membership. So moving on to the next item, we've got a presentation on some of the sexualized violence initiatives that are ongoing at Dalhousie University. There's food, so people can help themselves.
But, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. We can casually sit if you want. Yeah, you can pull up a chair and we can just sit down together. Ah. Sorry. Yeah, seriously, there's sandwiches, there's a veggie tray, there's coffee and probably tea, there's some iced water in case your throats are a little parched. I know mine is. Should I just wait until people are like 2 minutes? I'm just going to give y'all 2 to 3 to just like gather some sustenance. Sorry for taking your chair. Thank you, Mitch. Mm-hmm.
I always forget that these were recorded.
Oh my God.
always forget these are recorded.
It's getting spicy. Okay, why isn't this working?
Can you bounce one right there? Can you bounce one Chin? Between your chin and your leg. Between your chin and your leg. No, you're trying to trick me. Okay, it's not like
Everybody's gonna think I'm an idiot. Thank you. I love Katie George Jim's use of 2 chairs. Take a selfie.
Okay, do you want to get started?
Yep.
Folks.
Cool, so we're gonna get started just as people settle back in. If you have any questions, feel free to stop us throughout this presentation. It's gonna take us on a bit of twists and turns. Actually, there's an agenda and you can see the twists and turns. So first we're gonna be talking a little bit about what the phone line is. So what is the sexual assault and harassment phone line? Then we're gonna go into a little bit of early history and context of the phone line. So a bit before it started, how it came to be, and how that all kind of worked out. Then we'll talk about the pilot year of the sexual assault and harassment phone line, some successes, some challenges, leading into the review of the phone line and requesting additional funding support from Dalhousie University this summer. Then we'll talk a little bit about the shortened phone line for fall 2016, currently going on till November 3rd. And round it out talking about the strategy sessions that we had over the past 2 weeks to talk about the future of sexualized violence initiatives on campus.
So what is the phone line? It's a confidential and anonymous, peer-to-peer, non-judgmental, active listening information. Oh, hello. Okay. So what is the phone line? It's a confidential and anonymous, peer-to-peer, non-judgmental, active listening information and support line. It's answered by trained volunteers and it's open to all genders, and as well as all experiences of sexual and gender-based violence, both recent and historic. It's also open to folks who are supporting someone who has experienced violence, so you don't necessarily have to be someone that's been directly impacted, but if you're supporting someone, this is also a resource for you. It's aimed at Dal and King students, but of course, if anyone calls in, they're not turned away. It also builds capacity and skills on campus to address and prevent violence. It is not a counseling or advice line. It only provides support, information, and referrals, and it's not in competition with other services in the community, but actually works complementary to them.
Yeah, so as a little bit of early history and context, the phone line was first attempted to get off the ground in the fall of 2014, a year before the pilot project actually started. It was put together by a group of staff people from like the DSU and from different levied societies who wanted to address rape culture in a more tangible way on campus to support survivors during the first couple weeks of school. It didn't happen for various reasons, but they did hold an active listening training and they had a panel on rape culture in October, and that's kind of what happened. So just for a little bit of context of why something like a phone line is necessary, 1 in 5 women attending a post-secondary institution in North America experience sexual assault while completing their studies. There's the highest rates of sexual violence during the first 8 weeks of classes, and the reported rates of sexual assault at Dal and King's were higher than the national average among other post-secondary institutions from 2009 to 2013. There was also some local instances which have kind of, well, they've been building up over the past several years that kind of point towards the need for services such as the phone line. In 2013, there was the rape, harassment, and death of high school student Rehtaeh Parsons, which became very public. In fall of 2013, there was the SMU rape chant, which promoted sexual assault of underage girls. In fall of 2014 to winter 2015 area, there was the Dow School of Dentistry 2015 Gentlemen's Club Facebook group and all that went along with that. And then in the winter of 2015 later on, there was media coverage of a male-only Instagram account, Dal Jungle, which posted photos of young women engaged in sexual acts, and it wasn't really indicated if there was consent given for the photos or not. So those are just some experiences that happen literally here that point to the need for services such as this.
So is everyone familiar with the Dal Dentistry scandal? Yeah. So it prompted several reports that were created to address the culture of rampant misogyny, racism, and homophobia within the school and Dal at large. Of course, these issues aren't unique to dentistry faculty or at Dal, but it presents us with an opportunity to mitigate harm and shift cultures on campus through leadership, targeted education, and support. It's also important to note that the phone line didn't come as a response to Dal Dentistry. It was in progress and being worked on long before the events took place, as Rhiannon mentioned. But the events at the Faculty of Dentistry further punctuated the significance and necessity of a service like the phone line. It definitely also helped with funding.
Yeah, so May 2015 was when balls started to get really rolling on the phone line to kind of put it into place. And by August 2015, funds were allocated within the DSU to hire a phone line coordinator, set up training, and kind of get the phone line running. So volunteers were trained the weekend before orientation week. And then the phone line kicked off through orientation week where we promoted it. Lots of first-year students heard all about it, and lots of students in general heard all about it. It was originally slated to run until October 14th, but it was extended a couple times over the course of the year due to generous contributions from campus and community groups as well as Dow. So a funding proposal was worked out with Dow, where Dow would give an amount of money and agreed to fund the project for the rest of the year. The funding was noted as one time and a 50-50 cost splitting thing between the DSU and Dow. And then in January of last year, a new coordinator was hired, a second round of training took place, and the phone line was able to run until the end of April.
So to speak to some of its successes and challenges, I think the largest success is the existence of the phone line, which offered active listening and support to callers who experienced violence or were looking for information on how to help someone they knew. Some really great feedback that we received from community members and prospective students was that knowing the service was there helped increase feelings of security. And what we heard from residents and security was that being able to refer people to the service was extremely helpful. A huge success and a huge accomplishment was that we were able to train over 100 people in active listening, peer support, and referral to local services, which is really huge in wanting to change the culture. And we also improved training program with feedback of volunteers when we ran it the second time. Some of the challenges, of course, is uncertainty of funding. It's impacted all aspects of the phone line. It's created mixed messages on the length of the phone line. So when we first started, it was an 8-week project or 6-week project, and then it kept getting extended, and so the deadline kept changing. And these inconsistencies weren't great for people calling in, having that security, knowing that something was there for them. Plans for volunteer training and support had to be adjusted for this semester when we didn't get adequate funding from the university. Number of the conversations and callers were lower than anticipated, and some callers would hang up before speaking or said they misdialed. And I don't think that people hanging up is necessarily like a bad thing. Like just having them call in and knowing that support is available, I think is pretty huge.
Other cool things about like successes is like the amount of like emails or messages that's been sent to me about the phone line has been like extremely powerful. Like 200 students sent in letters of support about the phone line to administration over the summer. Countless societies have asked me how they can support the phone line and like see it continue. We got a message from a phone company yesterday who heard about like our struggles with the phone line and said they would give us free phones to run it.
And the phone line, like
And
free
yeah,
line,
and
free
the
everything.
actual phone line. So like the support for this has been like really amazing, and like that's a huge success in itself, is like people seeing the need for this.
We can take questions throughout.
Yeah.
Katie, can I give you the mic?
I just kind of have two questions. One, I know it probably wouldn't be public, but the information collected is like, is there any sense of data, like how many people call in, and like who? They don't obviously have to say their name, but like just the amount of numbers. Is that what you present to the university? That's kind of the first question.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that now?
Yeah,
or?
sure.
So what happened was part of the funding agreement with Dal last like October, November was that an external reviewer would do a review of the phone line after its completion in April. So that happened, and that was presented to both Dal and us. And within that, there was like transparency about like call volume and like everything was kind of on the table, but it's not like an overly public document. Yeah.
And secondly, I didn't quite catch the agenda, but is the budget and the breakdown of the costs on this presentation?
It's not on this presentation.
Okay, so
no.
then I have like how much of the funding would go? Is it mainly staffing, like the phone line, not the actual phone line itself?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Staffing was like the largest cost, and then like training and promotion were other like of the bigger ones. But the phones themselves was a smaller cost. Staffing is the volunteer coordinator and not the people who answer the calls, who are volunteers. Cool. Did anybody else have any questions? Cool. Oh, sorry.
I guess. Hello. Oh. Whoa. Okay. So I've heard this was used like provincially by a lot of people. So knowing that this is fair, like our phone line is fairly unique in the sense of like who uses it. It's one of the only peer-to-peer kind of phone lines out there in the province. Have you guys thought of seeing if other student unions would support it and having something like that?
Yeah, I mean, collaboration is definitely something that's always good. And it is the only phone line in Nova Scotia. The next closest one is in New Brunswick. Yeah. Yeah, we have talked about it. With that also comes the logistics of like, you have an actual phone. If you have like 5 campuses of people buying into the service and volunteering, it's like, how do you host that? So there's a lot of like further issues that are created by that, but it's definitely something to like think about and pursue. I don't know if you want to. Cool. So I hinted at it, but this summer there was an external review presented to the DSU and Dal, and afterwards the DSU approached Dal about funding the phone line in a multi-year stable funding agreement. This would reduce the uncertainty of the phone line's future, build community trust in the service itself through its consistency, and expand the education, training, and preventative components of the phone line. One of the biggest things with extending this phone line was adding a new staff person so that we could do on-the-ground education in like a real and mobilizing way. So Dal's response was late. They offered less than half of what was requested or required to run the phone line for the full next year, and had conditions unable to be met before September 2016. So ultimately, we went in a slightly different route.
Yeah, so we decided to launch a smaller, reduced version of the phone line during the first 8 weeks of the school year, coming from the stat that Rhiannon mentioned that sexual assaults are higher in the first 8 weeks of school. We wanted to be a support during that critical time, but it was also a time for students and community to meet, discuss, and organize like next steps. So the phone line ran from September 3rd and is ending on November 3rd, and on reduced hours from noon till midnight. So during this period, we planned strategy sessions to brainstorm how to support survivors of sexualized violence and gender-based violence on our campus beyond November 3rd. We held a strategy session on the 27th, and then held a decision-making session on the 6th.
So just as a little recap to what went on in the sessions. So in session 1, we met to discuss past, present, and possible future services to support survivors of sexualized violence on campus. It looked a lot like the first 10 slides in a different format. And we had a presentation on contextualizing the history, struggles, and triumphs of the phone line. We then broke into 4 smaller groups to answer some discussion questions and came back to a larger group to share the ideas together. There was about 20 people in attendance, and it was a mix of students, staff members of student unions, and student societies. And there was 3 main questions that we were asking. The first was, what would ideal survivor support look like at DAL? And this was envisioned as a big picture, ideal dream service. So if money, time, resources, people were not an issue, what do you want to see on this campus? The next was, what is urgently needed to support survivors on campus? So realizing that this service is ending on November 3rd, what can we do to support students in light of that? And the third being, who would resource, house, and direct survivor support on our campuses? And kind of where should that come from?
So overwhelmingly, all the groups in attendance identified wanting a fully funded, multifaceted survivor support center. It would be survivor-based, it would have information and create awareness, it was preventative and responsive. They wanted the phone line to run out of the center, a social worker who could provide professional counseling, but also still have the peer-to-peer support available, an education, advocacy, and campaign staff person, and it would be open to all genders, queer and trans-friendly, anti-racist, and culturally competent. It would be a low-barrier service. It would be student-run and volunteer-staffed with low wait times, and it would provide anonymous service. For urgent needs, students identified mental health support, something that can provide a bridge in existing service gaps, active listeners, increased cultural competence, and increased student capacity. From those discussions, it was very clear that people thought it should stay student-run, maybe out of the sub, the wellness room, or South House, and also that DAL should pay. People are open to a student levy to provide sustainable support, but students shouldn't have to bear the full cost of having to ensure their safety. From this, there were long-term and short-term ideas that were put together for moving forward.
Yeah, so after that first session, we got together with me, Amina, Rebecca, the phone line coordinator, and Sarah and Emily, who are 2 staff members here, and Kathleen, maybe I wasn't there actually, and we debriefed what happened in session 1 and kind of put together these ideas into a comprehensive thing that we were going to bring to session 2. That was a convoluted way of saying that, but we just took what was on like paper from people's mouths and made sense of it in a way. So this is what came up. It kind of broke down into short-term and long-term things. So in the short term, needs that were identified or ways to move forward, we're providing more robust information online about options, services, and supports that students can access. So it's no secret if you go to a DAL website, it's hard to find information. It can be hard to look through a 10-page document when you're trying to find like a support service after you've been sexually assaulted. Like that's not what you want to do. So kind of streamlining that. Providing a small dedicated office space in the sub. Providing an active listening training that could train people for one or more of the following. Maybe another low capacity phone line, a small group peer leaders session leadership, active listening at public or campus events, and one-on-one active listening office hours. In the more long-term category, it was pretty unanimous that people wanted like a survivor support center or a survivor support office on campus. Presented with like two issues. One, funding. So option one is like that we talked about was running a levy campaign contingent on university matching levy funding. So we haven't approached them about this yet because we need to work out the details of like the budget and like put together a proposal to go to them. But going to the university and saying, if we run a levy, will you match it? And getting money in that way. Or the other thing is running a levy campaign that is fully student funded. We also talked a bit about applying for grants and how to campaign to secure funding for 2017, 18, and beyond. And the other thing was the vision of the center or office, whatever it ended up being potentially. So like what is the scope of the services provided? What type of space is needed? What roles do staff play? Who governs the office or center? And what's the core services provided versus what additional services will we like to build towards? And if you look up here, a lot of these are more questions and less answers. And that's because we were bringing it back to the second session as a way to engage with people and see kind of what people wanted to do. So at the beginning of the second session, it was noted that there wasn't a large or representative amount of students in the room, so we opted to loosely discuss things further but not make any real decisions. People in the room were generally uncomfortable with that, but people in the room also did want to stay and discuss this because it's important to a lot of people. So we intended to discuss the short-term and long-term ideas for survivor support on campus and come to a decision about the direction that the DSU should be headed in. But because of this, we had some discussions but opted to open the floor to the AGM to kind of explain this whole process and the whole goings-on of the phone line to see if anybody had any questions, concerns, or like ideas about moving forward. At this session, a lot of what we talked about was doing another active listening training, when this would be, how it would be best used, and like what it would look like in terms of like a service from an operations standpoint. And people are very into building capacity on campus towards a culture of consent. That's the end. But yeah, so that was on Thursday, and that is where we're at today, basically. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
My first question would be, how do you make sure that the training is actually going across all campuses? And I'm assuming Truro is a part of this as well, and Sexton campus, just so that there's people around that are just passively spreading the word of, as well as like active campaigning, but actually having people around that would be like, oh, like hear cross stories and things like that, that would then be able to direct them forward?
Yeah, so we are in touch with somebody from Truro, the DSU rep from Truro, and I got from her a list of Truro resources for like like sexual assault services and like counseling services in general for students. And so that's now in the phone line binder. so the volunteers are like aware of Truro services, and like they have promotional material down on Truro campus for the phone line, which is good. In terms of like volunteers, you kind of get the volunteers that you get with a service like this. You know, what we saw when we did training was that, like typical with a lot of volunteer organizations, is that, you know, 100 people may be trained, but then maybe like 50 people end up like volunteering. So it's hard to kind of like get people from specific places, especially because it's like an anonymous service. But that is definitely something to consider, yeah.
Check. Sorry. In terms of promotion as well, we do obviously a lot of online promotion, as it is a service that folks don't have to physically be there to use. But the street team also is dedicated to tabling on all campuses. And so, pardon me? 3 days a week. And so that is one of the things the street team pushes like on a regular basis as well.
And you had a couple, eh?
My second one is just, has the phone line, you've done an audit of it and stuff like that, but has it gone through like Dow legal, your lawyer and stuff?
We have insurance to run the phone line, if that's what you mean. Like we got insurance before the service started last year.
Yeah. Oh, cool, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Does anybody else have any cues or comments or concerns? Yeah.
I just have a quick question about pairing with a prevention center or pairing with any prevention initiatives like on campus. So whether that's like with health promotion or like getting a space like on the second floor of LMP, or any ideas other than like taking it away so it's not a student union issue, it's like a university. I mean, obviously it needs to be student run and like should have input, but like to be funded and to be legitimized by the university in that sense. Did you ever think of?
Sorry, what was the question?
So like pairing it with initiatives that already exist and already that have funding from the university to kind of tie it into their mandate that already exists. Does that make sense? So like student health. Do you understand the question? Sorry.
I think that like one of the things that's really important about the phone line is that it's not attached to the university, because students don't have there hasn't been a great history of the university showing support for survivors, right? Like you take a look at the dentistry incident, what the report afterwards, like the task force that they put together, what the report recommended, they didn't follow. And so students have a hard time reaching out to some of the existing services that are in place because they don't feel like they're being supported. And so by having a student-run, separate from health services in our building service that's operated, whether it's a phone line or whether it's a fully funded sexual support center, it provides students with like needed support for them. That's like not biased from a, well, it doesn't fit in our budget kind of place.
Yeah, and just to add, like the reports literally said that students don't trust existing services, especially when dealing with like issues of sexual assault. So that's something that we've been really cognizant about. And of course, we want to partner with the university. Like look, they're like all around, and like they're like a great way to reach students. And like they say that they're invested in these issues as well, which would make grounds for like a great partnership. But what that partnership should look like is still student-led at the end of the day, because you know the services that they're putting forward aren't services that students are using, because they're services that students don't trust.
Maybe the other thing that I would add is that existing services are over-serviced, like they're not enough. Like counseling, for example, it's really hard to access counseling because of wait times, because there are so many people who are seeking that kind of support. So we have received calls where people are like, you know, I tried to reach out to counseling, but I couldn't. And so like called the phone line. So I think like adding additional services to services that are already like running thin would be a challenge.
So when you say existing programs, do you mean on campus or like off campus too?
Yeah, more like on campus is what that's referring to.
And so I would maybe add the same of, would there be a consideration of pairing with a municipal program or provincial that has good numbers, that has a good reputation?
Yeah, I mean, we applied for a provincial grant last year for the phone line, but we weren't successful because they said we weren't preventative enough. So like the preventative aspect is something that's like really needed, and like that educational component, and it's really unfortunate that like that's the thing that we're not able to kind of expand into when we're running something so like basic and pared down. But like that's definitely something to look into, is like pairing with larger bodies to see kind of what can be done. I'm not interested in like closing doors really.
Yeah. And my other question would be, knowing that the phone will be covered now, from my iffy, if it is, would that then make it feasible to run the program given what Dal had offered prior to September? Has that been considered? And
Yeah, I got that email yesterday actually, and I haven't followed up with it yet, to be honest. But like the actual phone itself is one of the smaller costs of running the service, because you're just paying for an actual phone line. Like the bulk of the costs come from the kind of like staff power, the training, and the promotions. So it's not like it's like extremely like nice and generous and appreciated, but it's not something that would make all the difference in the world to be able to flip and run it. Yeah.
We're talking about the phone line. Not partnering with the university is something that I do agree with on that issue, because the university has failed us in many regards when the dentistry position was just one thing. But the process of filing complaints or going through the university policies and is very cumbersome, and it's very difficult. And as a student who went through that with several issues that happened on campus a number of years ago, I have to agree. Having something that's in our union is good too. But I don't know why we're so either the union has the money or we don't have the money. I don't know why we're still hung up on this whole issue of like either we're going to provide, because rape culture exists on campus, sexual assault exists on campus. I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, and people in the LGBTQ community face higher rates of sexualized violence, and it's not even reported because I'm a trans woman. It's not even included in stats can. So I speak on this issue on a personal level, but also as an academic. And if it's such an important issue on campus and it's a partnership, why doesn't the DSU just find the money and instead of us sitting here having meetings after meetings and community things, why don't we just have the money and spend it? Because we have divisions in our student union which lose money every year, which could pay for that. The Greywood loses money. It's in a deficit every year. The grad house over here lost money. They had to ask our union and council for money because they don't have the fees for it. So we can support alcohol, we can support bars, but we can't support to reduce rape culture and sexualized violence on campus. Now, personally, I don't mean to sit and preach against our executive, and that's not what I'm saying. But I get tired of hearing all the same excuses and the same stories and stuff like that. And a perfect example of how this could work is there's this trans lifeline, and I don't know if people understand or have heard of the trans lifeline. It's run by trans people, and it's an advocacy service anybody in North America, anybody in Canada and US can call. And it's completely run on volunteers. And we have, as a trans woman, and trans person in the community, we have far less resources than our student union has. Extremely far less. And our community is able to pull together and put something like that together. So why can't our union put the volunteers together? Well, I can answer that question very simply, because I used to be the food bank coordinator here, and sometimes we don't see the hours that we could have at the food bank, or we don't see it. It's because it's a lack of mentorship and leadership sometimes that we don't hire the right people to get the right volunteers in the positions to make this work. And sometimes maybe that's what we need, or a little more of that, or just boot somebody in the ass to get things done. Now, mind you, I am a go-getter and I do get things done, and I understand. We're students. We have raising tuition. We have debt. We struggle with food. We struggle with economic barriers, and we struggle with other things on campus. It's not that simple. But I think wasting our time on certain issues and not moving forward is really cumbersome to our union, and there's areas within the budget we don't even use. And maybe it's time we just look at it and say, okay, no, we're just going to take that money, we're going to vote on it, we're going to use it, and then move on to the next issue, and then make a plan for next year. And whether that is a form of a levy or something. And, and we need to do this stuff proactive, not like next year or the year after. Because when the Dowplex is done, you get another $180 out of your student fees. Now, $180 per student times how many students on campus? 18,000 students, 20,000? That's an extra what? 200 grand, am I right? 100 grand, ballpark, and student fees coming in. It's going to there to pay for something that should already be paid for. So, either we partner with the university and say, okay, we want your money, or we don't. I say we don't. I say we be self-sufficient, and I say we move forward on the issue. Thanks.
I think, Bart, did you have a direct response or at least comment in a similar line?
So I just want to push back on the idea that we should just immediately pay for this, with the understanding that it is such an important issue, and with the understanding that every day we don't do this might be causing harm. The immediate capitulation of the DSU to the law school means that they will not fund it going forward. It means that we give up the fight, Dal gets to win, they get to say there's a sexual assault phone line at their school, and it costs them nothing. We are on a timeline that's very different from them. They can think in a very long-term, decade-long thing where we're on month-to-month, day-to-day thinking about student issues. And it's hard, but we do have a lot of clout that we can try and bring to bear and pressure the university to actually come through with this with funding. And yeah, it takes politicking, and it takes pressure, and it takes going and doing things like talking to media sources and explaining that Dow is no longer funding this, even though they claim to care about sexual assault and sexualized violence on campus. Dow's also, to my knowledge right now, trying to go through a major overhaul of their sexual assault and sexual harassment policy through an MOU with the government, which means that that's just another line that we can use to bring this pressure to bear. Well, I fully understand that every day we don't do this is a day that could be causing harm. I also do think that there is something to be said for at least trying to put a little more pressure on Dalhousie to actually step their game up and fund this. Because as soon as we just say that we can afford it and that we can do it, that's student money that can't be spent on other areas on campus to support students. It's a zero-sum game with a lot of our budget. If we can bring in outside money, it's no longer a zero-sum game.
Thanks.
Can I just respond to things first? Cool. So Jazz, thank you for your comments. I always appreciate when you talk. But ultimately, within student union work, like Bart said, we have a shorter game that we can play. When I walked in May with my team, we have a budget that's already set for us, and there's budget revisions in November that are coming up, which is an opportunity to make those priorities impactful and real. But ultimately, we walked into a budget where there wasn't any money for a phone line. So it is a barrier to actually doing that. But yeah, that's kind of what I want to say.
I think another important thing why this phone line costs so much is that a huge issue within young people in Halifax too is so many people are underpaid for the work that they're doing, especially work that's like as emotionally taxing as working on a phone line. The fact that we have so many student volunteers who are like willing to do this work is amazing, but the fact that they are volunteers is unfortunate in my opinion. Like all of these people put in time to support their peers, but in my opinion, it should be paid work. So the fact that we have one staff member who we're able to pay with our current budget is great, but the thought of putting this solely on volunteers is very, very, like, in my opinion, not the way that we should go because of the fact that students need money to live and students need money to work. And yeah, but I always appreciate your comments too. They're always very insightful.
So I was just wondering what kind of like outside genuine fundraising has been done, not just asking Dal to match a levy, but things like what DAS is doing at their event.
Yeah, so last year, from what I understand, the DSU approached different groups on campus, different societies to ask for funding, as well as different like faculties and departments. One thing that we talked about a lot this summer was that because the phone line stopped and started so much last year, it created that inconsistent service where people would like walk around campus and like not know that the phone line was still going. They thought it had ended. So something that we wanted to be really conscious of was like not trying to piecemeal this together to create an inconsistent service again, which ultimately wouldn't do it like justice. So what we could do within our scope was to create this smaller one that was within means, and to pursue more like sustainable funding avenues instead of doing something that, yeah, could see like stops and starts.
Okay, thanks.
I was just wondering, everybody's been talking about the cost. How much does this actually cost? I don't know that. Like, for what was the budget for last year, and what would the budget be if you could implement everything you wanted to? Like, if you could implement like the best program you could, how much money would you want to have on the table?
Yeah, so the actual costs for last year were $44,000. Dylan can give you like a larger breakdown of that if you would want. But the ideal budget that we went to Dal with in the summer was about $60,000, and that would see 1.5 full-time staff members, the line running for 12 months, and enough costs for like different training sessions ongoing throughout the year. So like I said earlier, that extra staff person would be the like education, training, and kind of like outreach role to be on the ground and like starting conversations with students. So within that picture of the phone line existing for a year, it was about 60,000.
The other thing to note is that we approached the university with the 60,000 as our like ideal scenario, but we also approached them with like a bare bones, like to have the phone line exist with one person, it would be 30,000, and the response that we got was half of what we needed to the bare bones of the phone line.
So just in the interest of moving forward, we do have other presentations for tonight. This is, of course, an ongoing issue. It's not an issue that we're deciding anything on substantively tonight. Are there any last questions? I'll do a last call for questions or comments, especially if they're on an issue that maybe hasn't been raised so far, to get as much diversity in the discussion as possible. Otherwise, we can move to one of our next presentations. Okay.
Has it been considered for the coordinator position to be a volunteer position if someone did volunteer, like other than the fact of like you'd feel bad for not paying them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to like what Kath said of like just doing a lot of like emotional labor. You know, it's heavy when you're dealing with sexual assault every day. Even if you're not the person that's answering like every one of those phone calls, that's what you're writing policies about. That's what you're writing like training reports about. You're trying to coordinate things, and you're trying to like map out the things that people need to be trained on to be prepared to talk to people who have experienced sexual assault. So I don't think it's something that we've considered in the most way, because we do believe that it's like very important that somebody be paid to do that work, because it is so intense.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Rhiannon and Amina, for the presentation. Of course, if anyone either here in person tonight or watching on the live stream has any further questions on that presentation, you can, of course, be in contact with the exec with those questions.
VPI@dsu.ca.
VPA@dsu.ca.
No worries. So the next item that we're going to have a presentation, just a sort of summary overview on the activities of the executive. As far as I know, it's going to be a collaborative presentation or run by Kathleen, discussing the activities of your executive.
I'm just going to get this up. Dylan, where'd you put it? Cool. Sorry. Can maybe if the execs could just sit like in the front area? No, you're good there. I just mean like because you're gonna have to pop up. Mitch is our honorary exec member. Okay, thank you all so much for coming. Even though we did not reach quorum, did everyone grab our Dalhousie Student Union Annual General Meeting report? So if you did not, they are over by that table. Maybe Rhiannon. I think everyone's probably got one. Cool. So yeah, this presentation is basically going to be a summation of this report, but also a couple chances for you folks to ask questions about things that are going on, and also a chance for us to introduce ourselves. Does anyone here not know who we are and what we do? Okay, just because that's part of the presentation, so I feel like that's a little bit redundant, but maybe for folks in the live stream, we'll do that part a little bit quicker. Hey, I'm Kathleen Reed. We weren't sure who was going to be here and who knew what about what was going on in the DSU, so we thought it would be a good idea to introduce ourselves and what our positions are. But for the interest of time and more opportunity for questions, we'll just say who we are, our position, and a fun fact about ourselves. And then folks can read on the slides what it is that we do. So, hey, I'm Kathleen. I am the president of the union. And a fun fact about me is I just fulfilled my dream to go see The Who in California last weekend. It was incredible. It's Rhiannon next.
Hi, I'm Rhiannon. I'm VP Internal. I do like society stuff and communication stuff. A lot around the sexual assault and harassment phone line in the Equity and Accessibility Office. An interesting fact about me and Dylan calculated today that I've spent 1/26th of my last year and a half playing video games. One video game.
I'm Dylan. I'm the VPFO, and I really enjoy puppies or dogs of any age. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Amina, and a fun fact, I have my green belt in Taekwondo.
Hey everyone, my name is Kelsey. I'm VP Student Life. My portfolio covers a lot of programming and wellness initiatives on campus. And fun fact about me, one of my favorite foods is olives. It's such a polarizing fact.
Just hold on to it.
Okay, yeah.
So what have we been up to? Thanks for sticking around for this. What have we been up to? So on your report there, you'll see at the top it says that this isn't just what the executives have been up to. We wouldn't be able to do all of these things without our full-time staff and our part-time staff members. Hey, part-time staff members over there. And all the students who are involved in the initiatives that we put on. So the DSU really is a collaborative body that gains help from all of its members. And also, just so you know, everything that's on this report is a very big summary of what's been happening. There are a lot of things that are also going on that and if they're not on here, it doesn't mean that they're not important. It just means that they're still ongoing or there are other things that we decided to include. So if you have questions about things that you've heard about that aren't on this report, feel free to still ask about them. So on an internal and external basis, over the summer, we prepared and executed our part-time staff training day. This year, we found it really important that the executives were more involved in part-time staff training day. In the past, it had been more of a full-time staff thing. And so we created a kind of committee with some full-time staff members and some executives to make the composition of the part-time staff training. And so we actually shifted to a 2-day model this year, which allowed for more training to happen, such as anti-oppression, safety, customer service. We brought back FISH, which is what would you call FISH, Dylan? It's a customer service program, but people just like it because it's funny. And so the kind of goal to make part-time staff training day better was to make sure that people who worked with the union felt like they were spokespeople for the union, felt like they could be a part of it, and felt comfortable talking about what was going on here. Member communication and outreach was an external thing that we have been working on all summer. So Rhiannon over there set up some regular communication meetings to make sure that there's communication happening towards our members on a consistent basis. It's really important that our members know. A lot of people walk around and they say, I don't really know what the DSU does. I don't really know how to get involved. I don't know why we even need a DSU. And so it's really important to us this year that we outreach and inform students why we're actually important and why we should be here. Rhiannon, do you have anything to add to that communication stuff? It's okay. She's eating a sandwich. We will move on. Any questions so far? Cool. Operations and university relations. So a quick thing, this happens every year with the executives, but we do bi-weekly lunches with the student services team, which is made up of the vice provost student affairs, the executive director of student life, who else? The executive director of student wellness, and some other folks.
Communications.
Oh, and communications. So basically, we meet up with those folks so we can collaborate on things that we're able to collaborate on. And we also have monthly breakfasts with the president of the university and his provost team. So those are opportunities for us to connect with them where we can, highlight student issues that they should be doing things about which they're not, and for them to ask us about initiatives that we have going on. So we're able to keep that communication line open with the university. There's a lot of operational things going on here in the union, but something that is important is our contract with Chartwells, which is our food service provider, is up at the end of this year. And we are currently just researching and looking into alternative options and if we are going to continue that partnership. So something that's really important to us as an executive is making sure that our food service options on campus are local and affordable, as well as culturally competent for our students, and have an environmental responsibility and maintain that as well. So that's something that myself and Dylan are looking into. Renovations, look where we're sitting. We are in the new atrium of the Student Union building. There's a lot of new things that happened this year. We went through some grueling construction, but I think we came out better. And yeah, renovations happen and it looks great. Any questions about that? Moving right along. Services, sorry, Angela. Wait, you need a mic. No, but for the live stream, you have to talk. Yeah.
Just for the food services and the sub thing, when do you expect consultations to start going down on that?
Dylan, do you want to answer that?
Likely, probably around January. So we're trying to map out a few options that would actually be presentable, because right now we're talking about them in kind of like high level ways that wouldn't really, it would be hard to see how they actually are implemented. So we're trying to look at how different models would be implemented and what that would mean for students on like a day-to-day basis when you walk around the sub, you know? So it's us, along with full-time staff that are heavily involved in the current food services and accounting and things like that. So.
Hey guys, I won't be so hard on you. I was just wondering with the food services, I'm kind of excited that we're moving forward because we can actually, I'd love to see some changes out here, like the Tim Hortons gone and stuff, and like move to a different spot instead of you come in and all you see is Tim Hortons, because we have these beautiful renovations, and I think it would be great, like maybe even a drive-through. You're distracting me. It's okay. I get easily distracted. And just, I guess my only concern is we're canceling the contract. Well, the contract's being...
Just to clarify, we're
Not canceling. Yeah. The contract's coming up for renewal? Yeah. Okay. Is there any cost associated with us, like, without renewing it? Like, is there any penalties or anything? Oh, good. Because I was here when the Sodexo contract got ended, and there was a big lot of expenses. And
so totally, I'll answer that. There's no cost associated with not renewing the contract, but to take on an alternative food service model would be a total revamp of the costs that currently exist. So if we were to go self-operated, we have to hire new staff members, stuff like that. So to compile all those budgets, we're working with the controller to present them to students so we can kind of see what the effects will be on the DSU budget. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, because I know in the past, like with the Loaded Ladle and different societies and stuff, there was a lot of opposition to having food services on campus that provided service to prisons, and like Airmark and Chartwell's provide leading and being an activist for social justice and stuff. That was a concern from community groups of having food services on campus that, like we said, local and green and also affordable. So
yeah, it's absolutely something we're thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
And there was another hand. Yeah, you're just behind the post, so it was a bit of a...
Thanks. So I'm a student from Sexton campus, so maybe you can see where this is going.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, like, is there anything going on with regards to that? Because I hear that all the time. Yeah. I've been working with sort of the local Sexton student government for the past few years now, and that's like the number one thing that I hear from students. So what could you guys tell me about that so far?
I'm glad you brought that up. This came up at another thing that I was at recently, and it comes up every year in elections. It's like the biggest topic that we talk about in Sexton debates and stuff like that. We understand that it is something that is incredibly pressing, and Daniel over there and I sit on the Sexton Project Development Committee, which is looking at all of the renovations that are happening at Sexton, and we're currently looking at a way to, because all of those project designs are done, we're currently looking at a way to outfit a space that a food service could go into on Sexton in the future. And maybe Daniel, even if you want to speak a little bit more to that, because if you feel like it, if not, you don't have to. You don't have to if you don't want to. Yeah, sure.
Just basically know that it is being explored, but as of right now, we're in an unfortunate state where there's a lot of plans going on at Sexton campus that have been concrete for a while, and so it's very hard to kind of sneak in there and insert your own ideas. So what we're looking at is how in the future we can use that to our advantage, the fact that we are upsizing the campus and the fact that we are adding more people within a space that still does not have adequate food services for the current population, to our advantage to kind of push that agenda forward more within the governments of the university. Yeah. And that's kind of where we are now, because trying to physically get something inserted into the plan is just beyond doing.
Yeah. Yeah. We're at a state right now where we have come into a position where we have a voice on a committee finally, and then now we're kind of figuring out how do we use that voice without people just getting shut down right away, right? So it is absolutely top of mind, and we're working on it. That's what I can tell you. Cool. Hope that's sufficient.
I think the only thing I'd add is that like the DSU has very limited space on Sexton. So like here where we have autonomy over this building, it's a lot different than Sexton where we have little to no space that we could actually provide a food service. So it's much more lobbying than it is us controlling. Yeah.
Cool. Any more questions? Can I move on? Sweet. More services that are new and, oh, we haven't gone into services yet. Okay, cool. So services that we've been working on are the health plan. This year we expanded the DSU health plan to include dental coverage for students, which is something. We are also looking at basically our health plan before wasn't the greatest, and now we're coming onto line with being on par for costs and services with other Atlantic schools is kind of our goal for this year. The DSU market is booming. It is growing very fast. Like physically, you can see how many food boxes are going out every Tuesday. So yeah, we've expanded a lot, and we have provided more student jobs now with that market. So this year we were able to hire a lot more folks to work there. And yeah, it's across Sexton and Studley. We have a market down in Sexton on Wednesdays. Yeah. Kelsey, did you want to talk about the wellness room?
So the wellness room is a space that's down in the basement, and it's really just like designed to be a student-centered place for like relaxation and kind of like finding a little bit of peace throughout your busy week. So all of the programming that's offered there is currently free of charge for students. It includes things like yoga 4 times a week, meditation. We offer a lot of like support services, like there's peer-to-peer mental health coaching. There's also hours with a social worker. We're trying to like reach students in avenues that don't necessarily follow like the traditional white room of like going to see a doctor or psychiatrist if you need help. So it's a lot of like mental health outreach for students. Later this month, you can look for financial planning as well. So we're trying to touch on student wellness in kind of like more like multifaceted ways. And we're also looking to get more programming in there, currently working on getting acupuncture and also looking at some culturally competent offerings for wellness as well.
Cool. The reason I handed that over to Kelsey is because that is now a new part of the VPSL portfolio is programming for the wellness room because we didn't have a wellness room before, so we added it to the VPSL portfolio. So in the future, that'll also come out of that office. Yeah. The Greywood, it's right there. It's newly renovated. It's newly awesome. It is no longer the Dome. And
Dome Bistro.
The Dome Bistro. Yeah, I mean, the reason that we decided that we wanted to renovate the Greywood was because over the past amount of years that we've been talking about this renovation, students have said that the space is not usable, it's too big, it's obviously lost a lot of money. So we've revamped this model to make sure that it's more accessible to students. Students actually want to come to the space, societies want to book the space. Yeah, it is new and improved, and let us know how you're liking it and if we can do anything to make it more improved. We got rid of Tiger Society. We didn't like it, so we got rid of it. Sorry, everyone didn't like it. Yeah, do you have a question about that? Mike. You liked it, didn't you?
I'm just wondering where people now go to look up societies, because I know that's like how I found societies last year. So I'm
just use that. No. Just don't pull it out of the thing.
Yeah, so if you go on the DSU website, you click on the Societies tab, and then you go to the first option, which is Find Societies. There's a PDF document with a list of all the ratified societies and their contact information. No, you can go to the document and search.
Control F.
You can also go to the DSU app, which has all of the societies listed as well. And on the app, it also has descriptions and links to their social media profiles. Yeah.
I think it's also really important to note that like one of the reasons we got rid of Tiger Society is because it was ridiculously expensive and was something we were able to do in-house. So that was like a huge cost saving for students.
Cool. Our Equity and Accessibility Office, we have hired 2 new ENA officers, neither of which are here. Mazumi used to be here. And yeah, we just hired them over the summer, and they have been hard at work trying to prepare campaigns and services for students. Any questions before I move on? Cool. Yep.
Actually, it might be the Tiger Society is probably why I couldn't find the DSU Constitution online. So.
It's on the website.
Is it on the website? Oh, it used to be on Tigers. The link took me there. Yeah, but the Constitution document. Anyway, okay, never mind. My question was about the health plan. Is there any way to get around the blackout period?
Dylan.
At the beginning of September?
Well, because I talked to the pharmacists and they said that the health plan was crap. Like, this is what they're saying. And I seen students, actual DAL students, come in and they're complaining that they can't use their health plan. And I was also at a physio clinic recently, and I'm there, and a DAL student come in and he said he needed physio, and they said, well, they're still on the blackout period, and then the student has to have this long conversation about not having accessible, or some students don't have funding that comes in time and they can't get prescriptions and stuff paid. And so when the health, there's different ways it works, but it's like, it's still on blackout, and this is like October.
The blackout should be over on September 19th. So the blackout applies because students can opt out, and that's because some students are double covered, and we don't want to charge students when we don't need to. So the blackout coverage applies, but you're still covered. It's just our direct billing partners can't direct bill because you could opt out in the same period. So we can't take that on because we would end up chasing students who had opted out but also direct billed. So it's like, it's a logistical problem, but it's one that we don't have much of a means around unless we end up charging the 7,000 students a year that opt out of the plan, which isn't good for anyone. So you still have access to your coverage. It's just that we can't direct bill.
Yeah, no, I know it's a refund basis, but if you went and got a service and they direct billed, the student's not going to pay for it, and then because they wouldn't have a receipt to bring in to claim for it because it would be direct billed.
No, during the blackout period, it can't be direct billed.
It can't be direct billed.
That's the
because
coverage benefit that you lose during the blackout
fear
period.
is that somebody would come in and opt out of the plan and then fraud the system because they already have coverage.
Well, not fraud the system, just
No, but
misuse the system because
misuse the system.
anyone could use it during that period.
Anybody could use it during that period.
We can't essentially do the direct billing until we know students have paid for the plan, right? And we're not able to get that confirmation from the registrar's office until the tuition deadline to pay, which is when you also pay for your health plan fee. So the moment we hear back from the registrar's office, okay, tuitions have been paid, these people are great, that's when the blackout period ends. Then direct billing is fine. But before that, students could potentially, and we're not saying that we're not trying to accuse students of doing this, but students could do go for services, get that all billed, and never pay for the actual plan. And that hurts the rest of students because we have a self-funded insurance plan, right? So students, you have to pay for the plan, and then you can use the services. Does that make sense?
So we can do further clarification
Yeah.
if it's just a minor point in understanding how that plan works. And we can also field additional questions and come back to this after the presentation is done. I just want to make sure that there's the opportunity to get through the whole presentation. That's all. Cool. Is there a question unrelated to blackout or tangents? Sure. No worries.
Great. We're moving on to programming and events. This is pretty much Kelsey World. Kelsey, do you want to talk about Orientation Week in DAFA super quick?
Sure. So quickly on orientation, great success. This year we extended orientation from 4 days to 7. So we included the nights for the first week of school, and that was amazing for kind of like that ongoing orientation for getting students really settled into the campus community and like more academically ready to succeed because they felt kind of like more at home. So that was really awesome. We also added a bunch of new events, including a week-long scavenger hunt of the city, a cultural cafe to expose students to some, in this case, new desserts, but as well as some societies on campus, and really kind of increase some engagement there for international students in our orientation, which was really important. DALFest this year was really great. We did something a little bit different. The first night was actually with a country twist, and the second night was some pop and alternative programming. We had about 2,000 people in attendance, which is great, especially because the first night was like 7 degrees in September. So that was freezing cold, but the crowd was really loud, and it was still really meaningful for the people that were there. Society and Volunteer Expo, this is a lot of Rhiannon, but essentially...
I was going to talk about that, but...
Okay.
Yeah.
then I'll just jump to the fourth thing. Student Life Committee has begun to meet. So we have a bunch of different student volunteers. We have a whole bunch of first years engaged this year as well in the volunteer roles, which is awesome. And essentially this group helps me plan a lot of the programming that happens on campus. Some of them are here right now. They're really engaged members of our community. Y'all are great.
And then, Rhiannon, if you wanted to talk about the Society and Volunteer Expo.
Yeah, it happened September 21st because of the rain day. It was outside in the quad. We had 1 million tables set up, which were super fun to move. And we had over 200 societies and volunteer organizations set up to let students know about how to join or get involved or how to volunteer with different groups. We had free popcorn, snow cones, and cotton candy, which was a hit because who doesn't love carnival-like food? And we also gave out some vouchers for the food trucks that we had set up, which was also a big hit because who doesn't like donuts?
Great. Advocacy. So I'm not going to go into the phone line because we just had a full presentation on it, so folks should know a lot about that. But Rhiannon, if you wanted to hand Amina the mic and she can speak about the other couple things there.
Yeah, so the National Student Day of Action is happening on November 2nd. Please come out. We're going all out. It's a National it's a National Student Day of Action, so students from all across Canada are going to be marching, taking to the streets, and demanding accessible post-secondary education for all. The 5 demands that we have is to eliminate tuition fees, grants not loans, more government funding, access for Indigenous learners, and safer campuses. So yeah, come out. External Action Committee, we meet every 2 weeks. We just had a meeting today, but we're actually meeting every week now just to plan for a National Day of Action. Things that have been on the go, municipal elections was something that we've been trying to get students hyped about and to vote. We will also be creating a racialized and Indigenous students collective, and the committee is open for everyone to join. Cool.
Who here voted in the municipal election so far?
I did.
Put your hand up. Good for you. Proud of you. Cool. So that's the whole presentation that we have today. We just wanted to give, we didn't want, it's mandated in the bylaws that we give a presentation on what we've been up to, but we did want to as well. Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate everyone who came out to this today. I think it's really important that people are engaged in what's going on in their union, and I know that half of you are counselors, but you're great counselors. Any questions about that presentation? Isaac, Mike.
Student Day of Action again? What is the National Student Day of Action again?
November 2nd.
Awesome. That's all I was.
Where will we be meeting, Amina, where will we be meeting to walk? Do you know?
That will TBD.
Okay, TBD.
But it'll be November 2nd around 11 or 11:30. Also, there's going to be academic amnesty that day, for students who might have a tutorial or exam or assignments due that day. Academic amnesty will be going through, I'm fairly confident, and you will not be penalized for missing those. So come out, no excuses.
Any other questions? Cool. Oh, thanks. Great. Mitch, go for it.
Okay, so thanks again for everyone who came out. A reminder to those here in person as well as those watching on the stream. This was not the sort of formal AGM. No sort of voting occurred or would have occurred if you just tuned in for the last little bit, given that we didn't meet quorum. There will be an additional AGM called, so be sure to keep track of DSU on social media as well as on the website for more information about that. So thanks to everybody who did come out. Those of you who are counselors, I encourage you, thank you for being here, first of all, and encourage you to continue reaching out to your constituencies and doing the good work that you're doing. And we don't actually need a motion to adjourn, which is great. But I just want one last call if there are any other questions, not just about the presentation, but generally about anything that went on tonight.
I'd also just say that all of us as executive have office hours, and it's posted online. So if ever you have questions and you don't want to ask them here, that's totally fair. But feel free to reach out to us, whether it's by phone, by email, or by office hours.
Perfect. Thanks to everybody who came out and to who watched. We're all set.